So yeah, today's talk is about the app experience. It's about how it's evolving, new technologies that are coming along, and what that has in store for apps and for users as well. So this is me. My name's Paul. I'm the MD at Sonin. So I've been doing mobile. I've been in the mobile space for around about 10 years. I was in the kind of mobile space a little bit before that as well, but pre-iPhone, I'm not sure you could really refer to a lot of it as we think of today as the mobile space. So one of my earliest claims to fame was that I was involved in a early kind of Tinder-esque competitor. And if we talk about app experiences, that certainly wasn't one. So you kind of have to kick off and you'd send a text message to a short code. And because there was no app store, you'd get a reverse build text back with a link that you'd tap. If your phone supported it, it would take you off to download it. You'd install it if you had the right data plan. You could then bring it down, and at that point you program in your preferences. You say what kind of person you're looking for. Because of the issues we had back in the day with data and everything else, that meant that it all ran over Bluetooth, which essentially meant that if you programmed it and you were lucky enough to find somebody else that had gone through this process to get the app, and you said that they meet your criteria and you got to within 10 foot of them, then you would know that there was somebody within 10 foot that you found attractive. There's quite a drawback there in so much as if you're within 10 foot of someone you find attractive, then you probably should have noticed by that point. So anyway, my personal background, I used to be a developer, so I come from doing things like business continuity software for Royal Bank of Scotland, PMO software for Virgin Atlantic, that type of thing. But I may be slightly unusual in so much as the bit that interests me maybe more now is the users, how we use these things. So I'm very interested in things like UX, CX, behavioural design, that type of thing. And nowadays I spend most of my time talking to our customers about what it is they want to do for their customers and what it is their customers want back in return, and how we can kind of bring that all together into a product. So, where it all starts, or where it all became useful, is of course back with the iPhone. And when this came along, we all came at it from a kind of web background. That was the experiences that we all had at that point in time. So the apps that we built in the very early days were kind of like this. So the app experience was based around just to try and keep people in the app for as long as we possibly could. And we wanted to own as much of it as we possibly could. So we built our own calendars, our own contact books. And on the whole, this was just a tremendously frustrating experience. So we ended up in scenarios where we had too much content, we had hidden menus burrowed away, and time again, we found ourselves with copies of websites inside apps. And that is a pretty good rule of thumb. If you have a copy of a website in your app, you're probably doing it wrong. And so from there, we came to understand a little bit more about what app users are, what they do, and the reality is that app users are much more task focused. So when we're opening an app, typically we want to achieve something. So that could be checking our bank balance, it could be sending a message, finding out what our friends and family are up to, or checking out the latest Arsenal defeat, in my case. And so the way that we approached apps, the way that it flowed and everything else became much more kind of what we think of as UX now, and it's all about these slippy experiences that help users get to where they want to go as quickly as possible, from A to B, with absolute minimal effort. And this is basically a user-centric approach, and it's a lot of what we look at today. So, anyone that's ever met me and spent more than about 30 seconds with me will know that I have 2 children. It's been a rolling joke in the office that any presentation or any meeting within the first 10 minutes we've spoken about them, kind of holding true. So I have Josh. Josh is my oldest, he's about 3 years old. And I also have Ollie. So Ollie is about 8 months old, and as anybody with kids will know, once again, an 8-month-old typically teething, and that means that I get absolutely no sleep. Last night I think I got 12:30, 3:30, and then finally up again at 5. As a result of that, I'm addicted to caffeine, and I spend all day drinking. I'm probably about 90% coffee right now. And that's where experiences like the Starbucks app really come in, and that kind of comes into its own for me. So when I open up the app, it's already personalised, it knows what it is I want to drink, knows where the coffee shop right by me is, and I can just tap a button, seamlessly check out, and as I walk into Starbucks, I just walk straight to the collection point, pick up my coffee and I walk out, get my caffeine hit as quickly as possible without any of the stuff in the middle, that I really don't want to be part of. I always forget the orange bubbles. So the point here is about understanding what it is that your users are going to want. There's a bit about understanding the whole journey they're going to go on, as well as just the part that you fulfill. Ultimately, the reason I have that Starbucks phone on my Starbucks app on my phone is because it's really, really useful to me. It's providing a lot of value. So it helps me get my coffee as quickly and possibly and smoothly as I possibly can. And in return, I buy coffee over and over and over and over again from Starbucks. And so that might sound really, really simple, but yet even now, time and time again, many brands kind of missed the mark. So I'm also a massive DIY enthusiast. There is absolutely no shortage of unfinished projects in my house. Particularly proud of a shed that I very nearly built about 2 years ago. It's about 80% there, and pretty sure 2020 will have all 4 walls. So that's the aim. But the Screwfix app, which in theory is very aligned to what it is that I want to do, they've kind of missed a lot of the expectations. So when you look at it, the app actually supplies you with PDF versions of the printed catalogues. You can browse the website and you can create a shopping list in the app, which is in no way related to anything that you're doing on the website, so you can't check out, and it's a very disjointed experience. As a result of that, it doesn't really represent what it is I'm going through, or anyone else is going through, and the reviews therefore aren't particularly strong, and the satisfaction is quite low. And IKEA, again, in a very similar space, so their original app is essentially just a digital catalogue of all of the stuff that you can buy from IKEA. So maybe it kind of meets that that requirement for a minimal product. You can look at what it is IKEA sell and you can say, that looks like a nice sofa. But it's not actually the journey that I'm going on as a user. That's just the kind of checkout point almost. Whereas other brands that have kind of got this much better understanding of what it is you're doing are maybe people like Dulux, for instance. So this is my dining room at home. This is actually my dining room at home. I'm kind of hoping that the window will be in by the end of today, which should be something to look forward to. But this point here is the point at which I'm kind of starting to look at Dulux and IKEA to figure out how it is that they can kind of fit into my plan. So with that in mind, Dulux Visualizer allows you to do some things really quickly, really easily, and put yourself in that position. So right at the first point, when I'm starting to think about what I'm doing, I can open up the app, I can aim it at my building site, I can tap and try colour after colour scheme all across the walls. This is incredibly useful for people like me that have absolutely no vision for interior decoration whatsoever. A couple more taps and you can order the tester pots, and then you can see it in the real world, and a couple more taps and you've finally got the paint there, sat ready to go. There's no more of those little colour strips, no more journeys back and forth from the shops to get more pots or whatever else. It's a nice, quick, easy experience. It's much more aligned to what it is that I want to be doing and the timescales in the busy world that I'm able to do them on. And equally, although the IKEA catalogue originally wasn't like this, obviously there's an IKEA Place app out now, and that's much better aligned to what it is I'm going through. So I can, with a couple of taps, I can quite quickly see where it is that I can put a sofa in my building site. I can answer questions like, what colour would go where, will it match with the fireplace? And there are no more arguments with my wife over my complete lack of vision, because it's there and we can all see it. It's directly aligned to the process that I'm going through as a user, what it is that they're supplying. IKEA were one of the first guys to use, so this is Apple's AR kit, it came out pretty recently, they're one of the first people to do it. It's very cool. If you haven't had a play with it, then download it and have a go. And so I guess going back to the original IKEA app, this is maybe one of the kind of changes in philosophy of late. I think anybody that's been involved in a digital product for a little while will have come across the letters MVP, minimal viable product, the concept of which is that we will get a product to market as quickly as possible that is going to meet the baseline needs of our users. And that's kind of fine in some circumstances, but in a lot of circumstances, if we're taking anything to market, then the issue is that users nowadays don't just want that baseline need met. So nowadays, a lot of the time we consider an MDP, which is a minimal desirable product. So this means that when we actually produce something, we take it to market, we still do it in the quickest possible way, but now we're looking for something that when we put it in someone's hands, they sit there and they go, oh, this is really cool, this is really useful, this is good for me, I want to get involved and I want more and more of this, rather than, yeah, this is all right, this is okay. Because ultimately, you know, users are demanding, and if we go through an app and we think it's okay and we delete it, they're very, very hard to get back. And no user out there sits there and thinks, well, this is great, this is an MVP, I'm going to delete it now, but I'll come back in 3 months' time, because they're probably doing something agile, they've probably got some great sprints lined up, they're going to work through their backlog, they're going to get some velocity, and then I'm going to see in 3 months where we are, because I reckon that's the one. Because no one thinks like that, it's ridiculous. Getting people back is very, very hard. So right from the offset, we're looking for something that's going to delight people. And that kind of ties back into those user expectations. So the reality is that nowadays we all expect to have a great experience with whatever tool we're using. And that can be obviously consumer stuff. We've talked about consumer stuff a little bit, but equally enterprise internal use tools, the stuff that we're all using day to day in our work environment. So we have a talk that we do about enterprise mobility as well, and part of that is we talk about how enterprise mobility was a kind of uniquely kind of consumer-led revolution. So rather than coming in and sitting in front of a computer that's supplied for us with the software that's put on there, enterprise in the workplace, or sorry, mobile in the workplace, kind of came from people bringing in their mobile phones. It's bring your own device, and they were setting up WhatsApp groups to communicate and sharing files through Dropbox and collaborating through tools like Slack or Evernote or whatever. And then it was down to us to figure out how it is that we could use that kind of productivity and that opportunity to enable people to do even more in a controlled manner rather than one that spirals out in different directions. But as a result of it, coming from that kind of background, it also means that people's expectations are set by what it is that they do in their day-to-day consumer lives outside of work. And we have to make sure that we match up to that in what it is we provide. Essentially, we have to make sure we can console people, provide a great experience that's actually aligned to what it is they're doing. And we've historically worked with people like automotive companies that have a bit more of an old school kind of, it's a work tool, we can build this and they will have to use it because it's a work tool. And then we've been brought in to talk to them about when they look to go to version 2 and they say we've not got the return that we were hoping for. And it takes about 10 minutes, one particular case took about 10 minutes to sit down with them and find out why it was that people weren't really engaging with the app. And that's because it wasn't aligned to their workflow. And people were printing out copies of all their different files and going around with them every day. And they were writing on the hand-printed, or sorry, on the printed copies, and then coming home, and because it was a work tool and they had to use it, they'd then sit down and take the handwritten versions and type them up, which completely removed all of the efficiency and all the real time and everything else that came with it. So all of this ultimately kind of comes back to the same thing, that we want more and more and more for less and less. You know, nowadays we all want to be able to achieve so much more from wherever we are, whenever we are, quickly and easily. We want experiences that are kind of crafted around us and our needs, rather than having to fit into some other way of doing things. And we expect to be brought the information to make decisions rather than having to go away and research, for example. We want it all there so that we can just move quickly. And in the consumer space, there are no better examples of this than somebody like Netflix. So back in the day, we might go to Blockbuster Video to get a DVD or a VHS, if we go back a bit further. And to do that, we might go through some research. So we might talk to our friends, we'll go online, maybe read a magazine or whatever it is to figure out what it is we want to watch. And then when we go in, we might look at the new releases section or browse a different genre or whatever it is. Nowadays, when you want to find something to watch, you open up Netflix and you expect Netflix to tell you what it is that you're going to watch next. So you look at it, and I've just finished watching Stranger Things, so I expect it to say, right, well, these are the next couple of things that you should watch. And the expectation that I've got is so high that, in fact, if those recommendations are wrong, I'm mildly offended. I'm not particularly pleased that they got them right, I'm offended that they might have got them wrong, and that's the kind of level of expectation that we have to try and meet up to. Is a delightful experience that's kind of accurate and proactive for them. So we kind of talked a little bit about where apps started back with the iPhone. We talked a little bit about the experience, the journey through from A to B. And then the next bit is to talk about the post-app era. So as I say, expectations getting higher and higher, meeting those expectations and providing great experience is really, really important. But then we come across things like increasingly screen fatigue, so people getting tired of staring down at the phones, and a lot of the time the experiences that are built are kind of taking away from the environment around us rather than allowing us to embrace it. So the term post-app era doesn't really talk about the removal of apps. It doesn't talk about the end of apps. We're not going to stop using our phones. We're not going to stop using apps. But it does refer to a change in what we do with them and how we use them. So in post-app era, how is it that we can use these experiences to enhance what we're doing rather than taking away and distracting from what's going on around us? Which leads nicely back to my caffeine addiction. So in a post-app era, do I actually need to open an app at all to order my Starbucks or other brand of coffee? Can we use micro-location services? So as I walk in through the door, an IB can trigger a push notification to my phone and asks if I want a coffee. As we know, it's already got the loyalty scheme on there, so it knows that I want cappuccinos. It has that personalisation. We have tokenised payments on there so that the payment can go through seamlessly in the background and everything is already integrated through to the EPOS system at the front. So this whole process can happen with just a single tap of a button, and it's all around me and as I walk in. And then kind of further to this is the more that we can do. So if I've had a particularly rough night's sleep, well, my Apple Watch has been able to detect that. So is it possible that as I walk in through the front door, the Starbucks app can pop up and say, hey Paul, had a bad night? How's about this one on us? And it can offer me a discount or a free coffee. And it can give that great customer experience that's a bit more personal and a bit more about you. Now, of course, there's still a tap of a button in here, so it's not really a zero-touch experience. So for that, maybe we need to look at something like a voice system. So voice is, of course, a much more natural experience. It's the way that we all learn to communicate in the first place. My son, my 3-year-old, despite the picture of him playing on an iPad, he doesn't know what he's doing. He can't use it, but yet he can tell Siri to turn the lights up in my front room, and he can control the temperature through my Nest thermostat, sometimes with quite devastating effects, but he can do it. And that's the kind of point. The next billion, as the expression goes, the next billion users will be using voice as their primary way of communicating and driving these apps. So in that instance, maybe I can pull up Starbucks and rather than having to get the app out at all, I can say to my car through CarKit or through my hands-free or whatever, I can say, I'm here, order me a coffee. And once again, we can go through the same flow. Starbucks already know what my favourite coffee is, they've got my geolocation from the phone, tokenised payments, and the whole thing goes through. And then again, looking at things like your voice, of course, there's a lot more information in your voice than there ever is in a tap of a button. So can we then use things like sentiment analysis to understand that you are tired or stressed, and then maybe build out a conversational interface where we say, you sound stressed, Paul, would you like a chocolate muffin as well today? The answer is always going to be yes, I always want a chocolate muffin. So, but again, it's a much more conversation, it's a much more bonded experience. So the next thing in post-app era, connected devices, IoT. It's no new concept, I think we're all quite familiar with it. And equally, integrations of systems isn't anything that's particularly new to us either. But if we go right back to the early days of apps, and we were saying about how in the early days we wanted to control everything, so we'd put in calendars and contact books, etc., etc. Nowadays we'd never dream of that. It's much more useful as part of a wider ecosystem. And that kind of, when we start to look at post-app era, those integrations need to become tighter and tighter. The data between the apps will start to be shared a lot more. So for instance, in the post-app era, if I get out and I go for a run, I've opened up Runtastic, it's seen that I've run my 1 kilometre before I've had more than enough. It then knows that I've got back home again because I've stopped running. So at that point, why is it that it can't communicate to my smart shower and it can drop the temperature from 40 degrees to 38 because it knows that I'm going to want things to be a little bit cooler because I've just got back from a run. So we did a talk a little while back at a tech day for Cola, the bathroom guys, and that was around post-app era and the integration of all these different systems. And they, at CES, recently announced their Alexa smart mirror. So it's Alexa integrated with a visual display in it as well. And if you're like a terrifying percentage of people out there that the first thing they do when they wake up in the morning is they check Facebook, well, is there any reason that you can't just get up and walk into your bathroom and then you can see your Facebook feed down the side? Or if you're feeling particularly efficient, maybe you want to see your work calendar or something like that. That information can follow you around and be shared and make for a much better experience again. And that's kind of one of those parts there is a key trend of the post-app era. So it's about the ability to personalize the environment around us. And we often make jokes about the fact that your phone probably knows you better than anyone else around you, better than your wife or your kids or your friends or anything else. Through the stuff that you do with your phone, it probably knows more about you than anyone else. And therefore that data that's in there gives you the ability to go anywhere and personalize things if it's enabled. So for instance, could you walk to your hotel room and rather than going to the desk, you could just use your phone to tap into your room? You're automatically checked in, your billing account set up, your showers and your baths are set to the temperature that you like them, your wake-up calls are set based on your calendar that's in your phone, your TV channels are set based on your preferences, everything is immediately customized to you, like a home from home. And then when we look at other things, so we look at voice, so obviously that's based on the presence of your phone, but in your own four walls, voice assistants know who you are, they're able to pick out different people, so therefore now we're in a scenario where you can just say, hey Siri, I'd like a coffee, or Alexa, I'd like a coffee, or whatever it is, and it knows you, it knows what your preferences are, and as a result of that, it can provide that experience. And then kind of facial recognition, which is maybe, if anybody that has an iPhone X is kind of getting used to it and familiar with it. You know, in a public setting, it's definitely fits in that kind of creepy area still. But in your own four walls, again, going back to the mirror, if you walk in and you see the mirror, is it that weird if it personalizes itself and gives you your own kind of calendar? And so the personalization that comes through some of these things, through greater access to systems, through greater access to the different apps that you're using, is starting to become more and more prevalent. So people like Airbnb, for instance, they will combine information on where you've been, where you are through geolocation, where you've traveled. It will look at things like your friends, it will look at their ratings, their experiences, what they liked, working on the theory of social groups kind of having similar ideas. And then rather than providing a bookings.com style booking experience, it is a curated, personalized trip from start to finish. Again, it much better keys into what it is that people actually want. And then obviously, there has to be an obligatory AI slide. There's no presentation about technology that can't have an AI slide at the moment. And we've kind of talked about a whole bunch of different ways that this can be used already. So everything from your Facebook newsfeed, through better search results, voice recognition, sentiment analysis, all of this is based on machine learning and AI. But I think when we look at post-app, some of the stuff that I quite like is the way that it can make for much, much more natural experiences. So once again, screenshots taken directly from my mobile phone. When I'm out shopping and I'm looking to try and get myself some nice pink ankle-high boots, rather than having to log on to ASOS and search and explain what it is that I want, I can quickly go to Instagram, I can find the image of the shoes that I want, and then I can use that to search, and through a bit of computer vision it can return back a whole variety of different things that are aligned to what it is I want. And this again is a much more natural way to do it. This is how we tend to shop anyway. We'll look for, you know, whether it's a mannequin in a window or somebody's jumper that you like or whatever it is, you'll sit there and you go, that looks good, I wonder where I can get something like that. And that again is kind of how we then look at this for ASOS. And you can use the same technology, we've used it for things like insurance companies to look at what damage has been done to a car, textile mapping, all kinds of stuff. So I guess at this point it kind of comes back around to how all of this kind of relates together. I've spoken about my children and my lack of sleep, decorating my house, slightly unusual weekend dressing habits, and it all kind of comes back to building out that parity between what it is the user wants across the entire journey and what it is that we're going to provide as a business. Because ultimately, like I said at the start, technology for technology's sake is just technology. If it doesn't key into what the user wants, there's no return on investment, and that doesn't really work out to be particularly beneficial for anyone. So, knowing where to start is always a bit of a fun one. It's a tremendously fast-moving industry, obviously. There's a lot of change, there's always new technology. And it's certainly what makes it exciting. It's what makes it exciting for us as a company anyway. And so the obvious initial starting point is understanding what it is that you want to get out of it, whether it's a better customer experience, increased revenue, better efficiency or communications, or whatever your business goal is. And then typically after this, we'll start to look at things in two halves. So the first part of it, unsurprisingly, being the technology side. So some of the companies that are kind of seen as maybe being a bit more kind of progressive and faster moving almost, if you like. People like Domino's, people like Amazon, they've all kind of gone through this initial, what we kind of cheesily call setting up for success, which is about understanding the key interactions that you're going to have with your customers. So Domino's, for instance, are renowned for being the guys that when they deliver your pizza box, there's a button on it, and you can tap that button, and it will automatically reorder you that pizza down the line. Similarly, they have the iPhone app where when you open it up, if you don't press no, it will reorder your pizza within 10 seconds. Because ultimately you're opening the app, what else is it you're going to do? You know, you're not browsing for pizzas for the weekend or something. So, and they've gone through this process of understanding what it is that you're going to want to do. So you're going to want to create an account, you're going to want to place an order, you're going to want to pay for that order. And then this all comes together and gets built out as a sensible, well-documented API strategy of how it is people are going to interact from a data point of view. And then this means that whatever we do on top of this, whatever new technology comes along, whether it is IoT or whether it's apps or whatever it is, we're much better positioned to iterate on top of that, quickly react, because we've got a secure, established, robust base underneath us. Second half, so the second half of it is unsurprisingly user-focused. So this changes from case to case. There's always different tools and different things that you might look to use, particularly a variation between kind of B2B, B2C, internal and external use tools. But the main part of this is really to make sure that we've built out an empathy and we understand what it is that our users are going to want to get, how it is that it's going to work out for them. So this we do through, you might use a combination of kind of observation, looking at what people are doing, ride-alongs, that type of thing, getting kind of on-the-ground experience. You might use some quantitative or qualitative research, so looking at a wide picture and then delving down into a little bit more. And the main aim is just to get that complete picture of the landscape and what the users are doing. And what we tend to look for when we do this is we tend to try and look for the gaps between the user's expectation and what it is that they're getting from a fulfillment of their expectation point of view. And then we also like to map that against what it is that the business thinks that they're providing as well, because sometimes that can provide some quite interesting results. And then off the back of that, we can then start to build out, so we've got this customer journey, we know all the points right from the start of when people are thinking about interacting with us, the journey they're going through, right to the end point, not necessarily when they purchase, but then support and on from there. We can build out this customer journey, and we can map what it is people are getting, and we can map that against what it is they're expecting, and then we can map that against what it is the business thinks they're providing. And that gives us the ability to see the gaps between what people want and what they're getting. And then we can start to look at the specific pain points, talk about solutions, and then build out a roadmap for how it is we're going to meet that. And the reality that sometimes comes up, like I say, not always, but sometimes people are pretty sure about what it is that their customers want and what it is that they want to see in a mobile experience. And sometimes that's not quite the case. So sometimes we see people, quite recently we saw a case where people were very sure about what it was that their clients wanted. And the clients kind of wanted it, but it wasn't really where the focus was. On the other side of the coins, one bit about the day-to-day experience of walking in somewhere that clients really wanted improved, and management were pretty sure they didn't. And it was only when you really dived down into the qualitative stuff, the interviews and everything else, you could see people kind of making excuses because they loved the brand so much. But ultimately, this was really detracting from the experience. So yeah, so this process is a great way to get a common vision of the customer, what it is they want, and then from here on, you can start to design, prototype, test stuff, and that's when the really fun part of it all starts. Okay. So we've talked through apps. We talked about when it is that they started. Importantly, we've talked about my children, always all important. We've talked about how important it is to align the goals of the user in the whole journey to what it is you're providing as a company. And then we've talked a little bit about post-app era, the technologies that are kind of coming along, and a couple of use cases for how those might be there. And I guess the point of all of this is that whatever it is that we're doing, the focus has got to be about the user and achieving whatever it is, the task they want to do. So it's not that apps are the destination, it's not that they're the end point, it's not that that's the reason that somebody's using it. It's about what it is they want to achieve and making sure that whatever it is that we supply is aligned and complete to their goals. And that's it from me. Thank you very much for listening.